class. Hello, argumentation class. Hope you're doing okay. I'm going to try not to shake the desk too much, but I get very excited and I'm like, and then it makes the camera shake because it's on this bad monitor. So I'm going to try not to do that. I'm going to try to be calm and rational. It's already shaking. This is already over before it started. I'm a giant failure. This video is Unit 2 kind of global responses to what you did. First of all, I think I should be clearer about what we're reading. So I'm going to go through the syllabus and just make sure everything's very clear, because I think a lot of you read ambiguities in the syllogism from Toulmin, and I didn't want you to read that. I want you to read the first part. The Peterson is a Swede, so he's not a Roman Catholic, all that stuff in the first part. But ambiguities with the syllogism is Toulmin taking on his colleagues who are all sort of dialecticians based on Aristotle's syllogism. He's saying the syllogism is, just to be clear, I'm not saying you didn't get it or anything. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward in our exploration of argument theory. The syllogism is too limiting to account for the way people argue in everyday life. So the situation as we're seeing it in argument education is that people are being taught one way to reason that ascribes the formal rules of logic that in very serious philosophical circles that's the gold standard for being right or finding something true or being able to say something is right. Just like in mathematics, there's one way. In philosophy, there's one way, right? In formal logic, there's one way. It has to follow those rules. Now, Toulmin would identify that as a field dependency, right? So this is how radical his work is. He's saying, no, that's just one way. So he's taking all his buddies' favorite thing and saying, well, that's just one way to do it. And it's like, you can see that you could just hear them like being, how dare you? This kind of thing. So that's part of it. He's against the syllogism, really. He thinks the syllogism's too limited. He doesn't want it banned or anything. He's not like an extremist, like, cancel the syllogism. But he wants it diminished in its applicability. It's not applicable to the kinds of reasoning that he thinks are being left out, which is everyday stuff. So you really have this kind of interesting, as we move forward, this interesting bifurcation in argument education, where in school you learn argument works a certain way with the fallacies, with logic, with evidence, and then in everyday life it doesn't function that way. People don't argue that way. So that's a huge gap, because you can get an A on your logic test and still go out and make terrible arguments and receive terrible arguments that don't deserve our assent out there. So he's trying to soften it to this question of believability and everything. So I think we got that. The second thing I'd say, and this is the big thing, is I want more of you in these presentations. I don't really want to report about the readings. You guys are doing an excellent job with that, by the way. You're getting it. But what's more interesting to me is where you weigh in on this stuff. You came into this class with an idea of what argument was. It's changing. I'm sure it's changing. Is it becoming stronger? Is it becoming weaker in a sense? Have you added things to it, taking things away? We're all argument theorists in a way, if we believe Wayne Brockreedy's Where is Argument, which is a powerful piece from Unit 1, that argument is where people are, and that's as far as he will go in theorizing it. Then everything else is just inductive. He's just bringing it up from observations of what people do when they argue. What's changed, and where do you stand now? And I really want to focus on this word that has come up a couple of times, the normative. Oops, that's not going to type. Here we go. What does it mean for something to be normative? Normative is the question of should. What should something be? So if I say that we have a normative definition of argument, you have a normative understanding of argument, that's argument as it should be. That's argument as it should be, argument in a way of optimally what it should do. So normative theory is saying argument ought to be like this and people do it wrong. So there's normative claims, but you don't have to have a normative theory. You could have an inductive theory, like Toulmin is talking about. This is the way it happens. Or like, we're going to talk in a minute. I'm going to do a video about chapter 5, I think, in the Tyndale book, sitting right over here, about audience, an inductive theory of audience, which is what Perlman and Ulbricht-Stidich are doing. Now, inductive is bottom up. You take a lot of examples and say, well, this must be how it works, as messy and goofy and uncertain as it is. You can do you could have a deductive theory, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. The choice is up to you. I just want to hear about you constructing your understanding of argument and how these readings play into that. That should prove that you understand the readings. You don't have to go piece by piece down it. mean, you can do that, but it's much more interesting to say, I think this, but now I think this, or I have a question. A lot of scholarly work is not about answers. It's about questions and refining questions for 20, 30, 40 years. So you might be refining questions for a very long time. Some people spend their whole life refining the questions of stuff. So a great question for this unit is, what's the difference between a bad argument and a fallacy? I don't think I'll ever get an answer to that question, no matter how much I read about it, no matter how much I think or write about it. So I'd like to know what questions are being refined for you if you don't have a coherent or cogent theory of argument yet, which is fine. There's no reason to have one. We're all explorers here. We're doing intellectual work, which is weird. It's not about finding the answer and solving problems. It's not what intellectual work is about. It's about refining and sharpening questions, making better tools for cutting, and questioning our questions. And sometimes it is about finding answers and solving problems, but that doesn't mean that it's always that way, right? So think about that. Be a little bit more chill, right? About that. I don't really need or want big reports on getting the reading right. Last thing, couple of questions. What's the relationship between argument and facts? A lot of you are talking about this. What's the relationship there? Isn't a fact a certain kind of argument? Like when someone says it's a fact, people will say, well, why? Isn't that the Toulmin question? What do you have to go on? So what's the difference between a fact and an argument? I'd like to hear somebody talk about that maybe. Whenever in Discord, whatever, we can have that chat. What's the relationship between argument and truth seeking? Is argument a tool for finding the truth? Is it okay to just rely on belief? That's what Toulmin's interested in, belief, and lots of argument theorists are interested in how do we create belief. It's very disconnected from any kind of large truth claim. And I'd also like to know a bit about the difference between arguing and other kinds of discourse. Like, have you thought about that? Like when someone's giving a speech, are they always arguing? Or can you give a speech where you're not offering an argument? So these are some of the things floating around in my head all the time, but are in particular relief because of the presentations that you did. So nice work. Let me know if you have any questions. These are some general thoughts. And then I'm going to get back to doing some lectures later this afternoon on some more of the reading. Now I found this way of doing it. If this is tolerable, we'll keep doing it this way. And let me know if you have any questions about anything.